Welcome to the NAHA webinar brought to you by the National Association for Holistic Aromatherapy. To learn more about NAHA, please visit www.naha.org. Tonight's presentation topic is Health Claims and Essential Oils, What You Need to Know. This educational webinar is being presented by Dr. Jessie Hawkins. Jessie Hawkins is a natural health scientific researcher and the director of the Franklin Institute of Wellness, and she is the NAHA Regional Director for Tennessee. Jessie combines her expertise as an aromatherapist and herbalist with her scientific training to conduct clinical trials and other scientific studies on the healing benefits of essential oils. She has a PhD in health and holds a bachelor's degree in environmental health, a master's degree in health promotion, and has an additional postgraduate education in the field of epidemiology. In addition to holding numerous certifications in a range of natural health fields, including aromatherapy, aromatic medicine, herbalism, childbirth education, labor support, and more, she travels regularly to conferences and workshops to ensure that her programs provide the most current and up-to-date information available. To learn more about Jessie, please visit her website at www.franklininstituteofwellness.com. And I'd like to just take a moment and welcome Jessie for being here this evening. She's one of our favorite presenters, has presented on several other webinar topics for us, as well as at the last NAHA conference. She's a wonderful researcher, and I'd like for her to just take a moment before she starts on her actual webinar topic to enlighten you all a little bit about an upcoming research project that she's working on with NAHA.
Yeah, so the current research project that we're working on is looking at the claims made that essential oils can act as endocrine disrupting chemicals, particularly as it relates to prepubertal gynecomastia in young boys. So you may have heard the claims that are going around that lavender and tea tree oils are able to cause prepubertal gynecomastia in young boys. These claims have been building since just over 12 years now, actually. And so last year, the NAHA board and the FIW research team spoke and kind of hammered out this project to finally either find this link or to put some information out there that demonstrates that there's not a link. And so we have started this groundbreaking research project with 3 different research studies contained in one project so that we can thoroughly examine this appropriately. And NAHA has generously been funding this and is currently hosting a crowdfunding project for this. And the board has put together some amazing prizes for all the contributors. I know you can get Sal's book. There's a lot of conference related stuff. Even if you're ready to renew your membership, some savings there. So the link here to support the project, you can click through if you download the slides for today's webinar. Also, I know it's kind of long and has a lot of different, slashes and dashes and whatnot in it. You can also go to any of the NAHA social media pages, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and they've been posting about it quite a bit as well. So make sure that you support this research. It's going to be a significant project for the field of aromatherapy.
Wonderful. Thanks for letting us know. We're very excited about it when it's going to be when we get the updates on it. So we appreciate all that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to do it.
Thank you.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
You can start your webinar topic for tonight, which I know so many in attendance and those that couldn't attend, because we got a lot of feedback on this one, are excited to know more about, as well as be more empowered in the whole issue with health claims and essential oils.
Well, good, good. And that is my goal tonight, is to help you to really look at this topic and realize it doesn't have to be so scary. It's not as complex as a lot of sources make it out to be, and to really kind of divide out the different regulatory authorities and look at what we need to do to comply with each and which regulations are really going to be applicable to you. So I want to start with a little bit about where we're coming from and what kind of information I'm going to be giving you tonight. As Kelly's mentioned, I'm the director at the Franklin Institute of Wellness and the FIW Foundation. And at the Franklin Institute of Wellness, we're a fully authorized post-secondary institution, which means we have to monitor all of our graduates' graduation rates and in-field placement rates. And we, for the last cycle, last regulatory cycle, have maintained 100% in-field graduate placement rate, thanks to some of the information I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, because we have an emphasis on making sure that our graduates are able to use this practically. And I know that's something that Kelly and I were just talking about as being such an important component, that you're really empowered to get out there and work with people and not have that uncertainty with what you can and can't do. But I'm also going to be integrating some information that we use from the FIW Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is dedicated exclusively to furthering integrative health. So what we do there is we work with companies, conduct clinical research studies, clinical trials on essential oils. We partner with organizations such as NAHA to, answer questions such as, does lavender essential oil cause prepubertal gynecomastia? And we also work with organizations and companies who are interested in getting clinical trials for their blends and for their products, particularly if they are botanical products, essential oils and herbs and things like that. So what we're doing tonight is actually kind of integrating the two of those things in together, talking a little bit about the professional practice side of things and how to share that information, and also talking about what that looks like if you are selling aromatherapy products. Because you might be here tonight because you are a consulting aromatherapist and you just want to make sure when you're talking to your clients that you're not breaking any laws. You might be a formulator and you're selling your products locally at farmers markets and local shops and whatnot. Or you might be an employee of a large, nationwide or international essential oil company, and you're working with a team of individuals and you want to make sure that your product labels and your compliance and all of that are in order. We're going to make sure tonight that we cover information that's applicable no matter who you are, no matter how you are spreading information about the health effects of essential oils. And there's going to be some takeaway that's going to be applicable to what you're doing specifically. And I'll also let you know when we're talking about things that are not necessarily going to be relevant to what it is that you're doing. So we're going to look at 3 regulatory agencies tonight. And of course, these are not all of the regulatory agencies that we have to be concerned with, but these are the 3 major agencies that we need to be concerned with. The first one is applicable to everyone who is a professional aromatherapist or who is providing health information to other people. And so whether you are not selling or formulating any products at all, or whether you are primarily selling and formulating products, this is going to be applicable. And that is the state law that you have that regulates the practice of medicine. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and commonalities that all 50 states have with those laws. If you're not in the US, there are also going to be some similar laws in your country related to who can practice medicine, who can diagnose, treat, and prescribe, and how we give health-related information in a way that is legal and is ethical. And then the other 2 regulatory agencies that we're going to talk about are specific to the sale of aromatherapy products. And I want to emphasize that. The FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration in the US, and the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, these are guidelines that are specific to the sale of products. And I know that's a big source of confusion, and we're going to touch on it in a little bit. But if you are not selling products, if you are only selling information, so if you're consulting as an aromatherapist, but you don't have a line of blends or a line of products that you sell, then those guidelines are not applicable to you. I recommend listening to those guidelines and paying attention to them so that should you ever expand into that practice, or even should you be looking at companies to work with, You're aware of what those guidelines might be, but you only have to worry about these if you're selling products, because they're guidelines for the sale of specific products. Now, of course, there are other regulatory agencies that exist, especially if you have other fields that you integrate in with your aromatherapy practice. So if you are a licensed care provider, then you're going to also have to answer to your board. And so you'll need to check on that to make sure that what you're doing fits within your scope of practice, or how you might do that without violating that scope of practice. There might also be other state level laws and guidelines, or those of you that are international, you might have other regulatory agencies that you need to be concerned with. So the information we cover is not applicable to every regulatory agency that exists, but we're going to focus primarily on these three, because these are what I have found to be the source of the most confusion. So let's take a closer look at each of these. So the first one is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Just as the name implies, they're responsible for protecting the public health by looking at a wide variety of foods and of drugs. And their goal is to protect the safety of the food supply, cosmetics, and then of course other products, biological products, drugs, products that emit radiation, and so on. When it comes to botanically related products, such as essential oils, then the FDA determines whether the product is a drug, a dietary supplement, and/or a cosmetic. And then based upon that classification, it then determines what needs to be stated on the product's label and how that product can be marketed. So the major classifications that we have here, if you have a paper where you're taking notes, you might want to kind of draw two sides to this. We have food and we have drugs. Those are the two major classifications that essential oils could fall under. Then what we're going to look at is where the essential oil falls, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But one point I want to go ahead and start emphasizing is that where the essential oil falls is not based upon the inherent nature of the essential oil. So we can't say all essential oils are foods or all essential oils are drugs. It actually has everything to do with the purpose and the function of that essential oil. So what are we wanting to do with the essential oil? Now, the FDA has exclusive jurisdiction over the safety and primary jurisdiction over the labeling of dietary supplements. And this is different from the FTC, which has primary jurisdiction over advertisement for dietary supplements. The FTC is going to regulate how you market and advertise your natural health products and dietary supplements. And they're primarily focused on ethics in advertising. They have truth in advertising laws, where number one, your advertising has to be truthful. It can't be misleading. And by truthful here, we're not talking about semantics. We're not talking about technicalities. We're talking about the type of truthful statements, the type of honesty that we all taught our 3-year-olds. What are you actually conveying to me? What is the crux of your message to me? Not what words did you use and are they technically true? Are they technically the case? Because misleading someone is misleading someone, whether it's direct or whether it is indirect. And then also number 2, making sure that before an ad is disseminated, the advertiser, which if you are working for an essential oil company or if you are selling essential oil products, then you are that advertiser. You must have adequate substantiation for all of your objective product claims. And we're going to break that down, unpack it, and look at what that means later on in this webinar. But this is the part of the regulatory minefield, if you will, that the FTC is in charge of. So they're looking at protecting people from false claims as well as from unsubstantiated claims. Now, I want to emphasize here that unsubstantiated claims are in the same classification as false claims. And sometimes in the field of natural health, that can get really frustrating, because making a claim that can't be scientifically justified is put right up there with making up a complete nonsense claim. You could just completely make something up, some snake oil product and some, false method or procedure of doing something. Or you could have something that you think is accurate, that your experience shows you is accurate, but you don't actually have what constitutes substantiation, and it doesn't matter. It's all in there together. and you could be required to compensate customers. And as an example here, we've got just from last November a copy of a letter that was sent out where the Federal Trade Commission mailed out 16,596 checks totaling over $750,000 to customers who bought 2 dietary supplements. One of these supplements, Neuro Plus, was actually marketed to improve cognitive performance. So you might be thinking that actually sounds like something we're allowed to do. We're allowed to put it out there and say it improves cognitive performance. But in this case, they did not have sufficient substantiation. And so it was considered a deceptively marketed product, just as it would have been if, they were completely making it up and truly selling snake oil. Each customer got an average refund amount of just under $45. So you can see this adds up quite a bit. It can be very, very expensive to accidentally or inadvertently violate these guidelines. But there's a lot of room here to make sure that we're getting it right. This is something that's also important for those of you who are listening and none of the previous descriptions apply to you. If you're not yet an aromatherapist, you're not yet developing products, you're just looking at kind of how to do this, but you're currently consumers of products, then this is good information to have as well. Because the integrative health market is now a multi-billion-dollar industry and rapidly growing. It's one of the fastest growing industries that we have. And so what that means is there's a lot of room for some really great products that are hitting the market, but there's also a lot of room for deceptive people who are looking to make a quick buck and take advantage of some of the regulatory loopholes and take advantage of some of the lack of knowledge. So you want to be an informed consumer as well as being an informed professional. So that's something that's important to keep in mind as well. The final regulatory authority that we're looking at is licensing, and this is, again, your state-by-state license. And I've got a couple of quotes here on the slides from the AMA Journal of Ethics and from a professor who focuses on the legalization of the practice of medicine, where essentially the way we understand the practice of medicine is diagnosing, treating, and prescribing. Those are the 3 things that we see here. Medical, surgery, curing disease, whatever term we want to use, it boils down to diagnosing, treating, and prescribing. And the right to practice medicine in the US is a privilege that is granted by state. So it is a state-to-state license. You can be licensed in one state, and that does not mean you can practice in a different state. Every single state is its own entity, and it is something where actually those laws do vary quite a bit from state to state. At the same time, though, there are also a lot of overarching common laws that we see between these. Another AMA quote here about these state medical boards: the function is not just to restrict who can practice medicine, but also to make sure there's a system in place for disciplining physicians who are violating medical practice acts, and actually for stripping licenses away from people when appropriate. If they are incompetent, if they are unprofessional, if they are improperly trained, making sure that there is some sort of retaliation in place when someone harms a patient or when someone does something they shouldn't be, that there's some sort of process in place. Now, of course, there's always ongoing debate about whether or not they're doing a sufficient job from state to state at actually making sure that the only people who practice medicine are those who are qualified and that incompetent physicians have successfully been removed. And of course, it's a system that is constantly improving upon itself and of course always has a lot of room to go. But really it doesn't matter how much we agree or disagree with this setup. This is still the setup that we have to work within. This is where we find ourselves as aromatherapists or as individuals who are sharing health-related information with other people. And so that means we have an obligation to practice our specific area of expertise in a way that is legal within that current system. Now, again, what is legal and what is not is going to vary state by state, depending upon your unique medical boards and your unique laws that govern the practice of medicine. But there are quite a few consistent patterns, all of which differ from the way we practice integrative medicine. The goals and objectives of the practice of mainstream medicine differ from the goals and objectives of the practice of aromatherapy. And that's really important. Once we learn and embrace the goals and objectives within the practice of aromatherapy, then we don't really worry about accidentally practicing medicine. Because as we're educating and empowering people to take control of their health through these natural tools, whether you're an herbalist, aromatherapist, dietary supplement specialist, whatever that might be, dietitian, then we are engaging in something that is completely different from the practice of medicine. The practice of medicine has everything to do with taking control of someone else's health. When someone comes in and they're sick, you are the source of information if you are their primary care provider, and you are the one who will determine which disease or health condition is responsible for that person's symptoms. You might order x-rays, you might conduct lab work, you might use a wide variety of tools which you've been trained to use to get additional information that you will then put together, combine with your prior learning, and determine what exactly it is that's causing these symptoms. So when someone comes in with a headache, you have the tools and the expertise to say this is cancer after a series of tests or interventions, or to say, this is caffeine withdrawal. You didn't have your coffee today, or whatever it might be, through the use of different diagnostic tools and through that training. Aromatherapists, herbalists, integrative health providers don't use that same array of tools. We do not have x-ray machines in our toolkit. We don't take blood and send it off to a lab. That's not something that's in our toolkit. In our education and training, while we study pathophysiology, it's not something that focuses on the state of disease. We focus on the state of wellness. We look at psychoneuroimmunology, how we can improve mental wellness, how we can improve physical well-being. We don't study the difference between different types of cancer or the difference between bacterial infections. So the training here is very different. Where things get a little bit more muddy is when we look at treating and prescribing. And so here we've got some very clear definitions. To treat is to manage and care for a disease or disorder. So you're the person who's managing that care. And we'll typically see that reflected in the modern medical community. If you get referred out to another doctor, for x-rays, if you get sent somewhere for x-rays, they send it back to your doctor. That person manages your care. They are the hub, and they are the responsible person for your care. You don't have access even to certain information until you ask or until you go in and obtain it. We don't practice that way as aromatherapists. We don't take that choice or that responsibility away from our clients. And then to prescribe is to advise, to authorize, or give directions for something to be done. So it's kind of, take two and call me in the morning sort of approach. And this is something where the medical community has been emphasizing for many decades the need for another type of health professional. In fact, a 2008 Journal of Medical Ethics article said, access to healthcare is important, but equally important is the need to empower individuals to take responsibility for their own health. There's a need for another type of health professional who doesn't diagnose, treat, and prescribe, but who helps with prevention, who helps with empowerment, who helps with education, who does all of these other things. And I also want to point out, it's also in the NAHA Code of Ethics. 1.12 specifically states that we don't diagnose, prescribe, or provide any service which requires a license. So this is something that is in complete odds with the practice of aromatherapy and herbalism and many other integrative health fields. Now, I know there are some differences for people who are licensed as an acupuncturist, for example, but you'll notice I mentioned license. It's a field that's licensed, and so there is that regulatory agency to make sure that people are doing things a certain way, and also to allow them to practice that certain area of expertise. For herbalism, aromatherapy, all of the unlicensed areas within integrative health, we don't use this practice model here. We use a completely different model. Another important thing to point out is that we have laws in every single state that specifically allow for the sale of health-related information. The sale of health-related information is a consultation. If I am selling you health-related information, I'm consulting with you. and I am giving you that information. Even here in Tennessee, where FIW is located, we have some of the strictest guidelines about the practice of medicine in the entire country. And there are specific clauses specifying this is not referring to the sale of health-related information. This is specifically referring to, other practices that are prohibited here in our state. So consulting with individual, giving them information, and promoting health is something that is specifically encouraged in every single state. And it is a separate profession, it's a separate field than treating diseases. And it's an important field, a field that we actually need. So a key distinction here, if you're looking for kind of a Cliff's Notes summary of how do I know what I'm doing, which one am I, especially if you are an individual who wears multiple hats, maybe you are an acupuncturist or a nurse or a physician and also an aromatherapist, and you have to go back and forth between your two hats, then that's actually a difficult task. It can be difficult at times to switch back and forth between those roles. But a key distinction when you're looking for just a quick tip or when you're looking for a Cliff's Notes version of this is who is retaining control over the health-related decisions. Health promotion professionals, such as aromatherapists and herbalists, don't give directives. We don't say, take 2 of this essential oil capsule and call me in the morning. We emphasize empowerment, and sometimes that also means that we are relinquishing control, including the decision-making. So sometimes that means there's a client who makes a decision that we don't necessarily agree with, but we're giving them the education to make an educated decision and to be in charge of their own health versus stepping in the way that we're kind of used to with the medical paradigm and saying, no, 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 you can't do that. I'm in charge of your health. I make the call. I make the decision. And as a result, aromatherapists are able to create an environment of individual support and guidance that produces lasting changes in health. And research shows that the average length of time that aromatherapists and herbalists and other health professionals work with people tends to be much longer. Each individual session is much longer than the 15 minutes you get at your doctor's office, and the total duration of time is much longer. If you have an ear infection, you might go to the doctor once, or you might go once and then for a follow-up, and then that's it. With an aromatherapist, you go back and you form a relationship because the aromatherapist has created this support and guidance that will help you create those lasting changes in your health. So it's a very different dynamic. It's a very different relationship between the two. Related to that, and I wanted to point this out because I know this is a common area of confusion. This is even applicable when we talk about ingesting essential oils, which I know is sometimes a little bit of a swear word in aromatherapy when we talk about ingesting essential oils. One of the reasons that a lot of people have not studied ingestion of essential oils is from this popular belief that you have to be licensed to practice medicine to talk about ingesting. But this is not actually the case. In fact, if this were the case, herbalists would never be able to practice. A lot of other dietary supplement specialists would not be able to practice because they're telling you to ingest products all the time, or they're actually educating and empowering you to ingest products all the time. The distinction between what a licensed and an unlicensed health professional can do is not found in the application of a product. It's not aromatherapist can tell you when you need to apply this to your skin or inhale it, and you have to have a doctor who tells you to ingest it. It has everything to do with the method of practice. Is this a long-term interactive relationship where I am empowering you to make better decisions about your health through the use of essential oils, and I am formulating blends for you, and I am helping you take control? Or is this a top-down relationship where I'm the boss of you, I'm telling you what to do with your body, and you need to do this, that, and the other, or else sort of scenario? So it's a very, very different relationship. So the difference is if we're instructing someone or ordering them to do something versus we're educating and empowering them to do something. And one way that we do that just here at FIW is through an evidence-based framework that we call the 5-pillar method. And it was developed by our aromatherapy department chair and I, that helps to guide that practice of individual health promotion to ensure education and empowerment rather than diagnosing, treating, and prescribing. And so what we do here is we actually train according to this method where we have a client-centered practice. And this is a reason that people choose integrative health, isn't it? They come to us because they want someone to listen to them. They want someone to pay attention to what they really need, not to be just dictating what it is that they need to do, but to listen to them and to work with them and to empower them. And this method helps to make sure that the client is supported through that approach and that they retain complete control of their health-related decisions. And to accomplish this, we use a lot of evidence-based tools: motivational interviewing, the client-centered triad, active listening, a lot of different tools that help to make sure that the client is heard, to help to make sure that their priorities are met, that their needs are met, and most importantly, that they have a sustainable plan of action that they can actually accomplish. So again, the distinction here between these two is not one of semantics. It has everything to do with what we're doing. And if we use that 5-pillar method or whatever similar approach you may have been taught, where we are truly embracing and integrating the scope of practice of an aromatherapist, then we never have to be constantly looking over our shoulder and saying, oh wait, did I accidentally practice medicine there? Oh no, was that an undercover agent and now I'm in trouble because I just practiced medicine? Am I about to get a knock at my door or a letter? We don't have to live in that level of fear, because it really doesn't matter who it was that came to consult with you. You've not been accidentally practicing medicine. You've been practicing aromatherapy, which is different than practicing medicine. So I want to point out here that this is not semantics. And I know that that's an area of confusion that a lot of people have. If I bring a client in and say, well, I can't tell you what to do, but wink, wink, if you do this, you've still communicated a message that is a treatment. Or I can't tell you what that is, but if I were you, I would be, or the FDA won't let me say this, but any of those kind of wink, wink, nod, nod type communications are communicating a protocol, a diagnosis, a treatment. And when it comes down to it, when we're looking at all of these regulatory agencies, they're not really concerned about semantics. They're concerned about the total takeaway. They are looking at, what does the client believe happened? Does the client believe you just diagnosed them and prescribed them something? Does the client believe that you have ordered them to go and take this specific product or to use this specific thing? Or do they understand what they're using, why they're using it, how to continue using it at home, what you blended for them, and why? Put yourself in their shoes. What is their comprehension and understanding of your visit? So if you ever need kind of a measuring stick to check and see, am I accidentally practicing medicine? That's a really good way to do it. Because that total perception, that total communication is actually the theme of the entire webinar. What is the takeaway message, not what words did I use to say something? And a really good example of that I want to give you is a speed limit. I can change the speedometer in my car. So if the speed limit is 40, I could be going 45, but my car still says I'm going 40. That's not the purpose of the speed limit though. And it's not going to protect me from getting a ticket, even if I can show them that my speedometer said I was going 40. If my vehicle was actually going 45, then I'm speeding. The law is not there because it wants me to look at a number that says 40 on my dashboard. The law is there because it wants my vehicle to go under 40 miles an hour. So it's a very similar kind of concept. What are we communicating? Not just what words are we using, but what's the total message that we're giving somebody? That's actually where that line is. So moving along, the next regulatory agency we're going to look at is FDA Oversight. Now, the previous regulatory agency we talked about is applicable to everyone, every single person who's here. FDA Oversight is only applicable with sales. So if you are not selling oils or blends, if you don't sell a product, then this is not applicable to you. And I know that's been a big area of confusion, especially recently as the FDA has been more involved with essential oils and with herbal products. What can I say and what can I not say? The FDA, remember, regulates food and drugs. It doesn't regulate the spread of communication. That is regulated by the practice of medicine and free speech and other rules and guidelines and laws and so forth that we have here. The FDA is 100% concerned with what you're selling and what claims you're making about what you're selling. So if you're selling something, whether you are selling something through a large company as a representative, or whether you are a sales rep, or you actually are an independent consultant, or you are an employee of a firm, or you are an entrepreneur that has created your own line of products, no matter how big or small, then the FDA is applicable to you. If you are only practicing as an aromatherapist, providing education to clients and creating custom formulations and blends on demand for your clients, this is not applicable to what you tell people. This has everything to do with what claims you make about a product line that you specifically sell. So the first step to figure out what you need to worry about with the FDA is to ask yourself what you're selling. And the answer here is not something you're going to find on the FDA website. The answer here, you're going to be able to answer this one yourself. What am I selling? How am I selling this? We can look all day long at how they define a drug, how they define a supplement, how they define a cosmetic, and we're going to, not all day or even all night, but for a little while. But ultimately, this question can only be answered by you. Why did you formulate this product? What do you intend it to do? That tells you where it falls. It has nothing to do with what you put in it, unless you're putting controlled substances in it. But assuming you're just putting regular essential oil ingredients in there, then it has nothing to do with what you've put in it. It has everything to do with what you intend the product to be used for. And this is something that we do at the FIW Foundation for companies. If you're not sure, if you've been so engrossed with this product for a while that you're really not sure what the takeaway message is, we actually do a free science audit where we will look at your product line and we will tell you, this is the takeaway, this is the message, here's where you're okay, here's where you're not okay. Perfectly free thing that we offer to help companies get in compliance with this. So when we're looking at these, the classifications they can be are, again, drug, supplement, or cosmetic. A drug can be a botanical. That's another big question that we have, but it's an herb or it's an essential oil, so it can't be a drug. Or I've seen people say, well, it's an herb, so the FDA doesn't regulate it the way they regulate drugs. There are a lot of drugs the FDA regulates that are prescription only that are made from plants. Botanicals can be drugs because they can cure and prevent and treat disease in human beings. So they actually have a separate classification for botanical drugs with the understanding that they're going to have more complex chemistry than some of these synthetic products. A botanical drug is something that we use to diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent disease in humans. It can consist of vegetable materials, plant materials. It could also include other substances as well, algae and so on. But in terms of what we're talking about, primarily plant materials because we're looking at the essential oils. It can be available as a solution like a tea, a tablet, an elixir, a topical application such as our essential oils, or an injection. And the FDA recognizes that botanical drug products often have unique features, complex mixtures. They're chemically diverse. They're not the same as just a single synthetic product that we typically see when we go into the drugstore. They often lack a distinct active ingredient, like our essential oils. We have professionals and experts who will go back and forth about what makes peppermint work. Is it the menthol? Is it the combination? Are there other ingredients in there? How does bergamot help with this? And sometimes we can isolate things down. We can figure out why bergamot is phototoxic. At the same time, we also know that a lot of our essential oils work because they are a complex mixture that is chemically diverse, not because this is the active ingredient and that is not. Also, botanical drugs have substantial prior human use, which we'll talk about later is something that's important. So this is how herbs can be drugs. An essential oil absolutely can be a drug. And some essential oils already are FDA approved drugs. You might have products in your product line that you could be making drug claims for. They already have FDA approval. You just didn't know it. So there are already essential oils that do have that authorization and approval. And of course, there are many others that could very easily get that authorization and approval. So once you have that, you can make a health claim, which is another thing we need to really break down. So if only an FDA approved drug can make a health claim, then we really need to be clear about what a health claim is. A health claim has two parts to it: a substance, which in this case would be our essential oil or our blend or our lotion or whatever we've made with the essential oil, and a disease or a health-related condition. If you have both of those ingredients, you've got a health claim. If you specifically mention acne, cancer, hypertension, eczema, psoriasis, dandruff, anxiety, or if you also are talking about mitigating the side effects of a disease, so radiation burns or complications from something, any of these things, you're making a health claim. Now, again, this is not an issue of semantics. You can call acne zits or spots or pimples. You still mentioned a disease state. We can use clever terms. We can say tummy, we can say sniffles, we can say whatever. We're still mentioning a disease state. Again, the claim can be direct or it can be implied. What is the takeaway? What is the message that we are giving? The full message, not just the key words that we're using. It doesn't matter if you're not using a single word that exists in a medical dictionary. If you've communicated that your essential oil blend cures the common cold without ever saying the common cold, you still are making a health claim and you still are going to run into issues here. Now, essential oils can also be dietary supplements, and dietary supplements are regulated very differently than all of our drugs because they actually fall under that food classification. And there are quite a few botanical preparations that are marketed in the US as dietary supplements, but most of them are herbs. We don't see this quite as often in aromatherapy. We have a few essential oil dietary supplements. Selexin, which is the standardized lavender supplement, comes to mind. It's a very common one. We also have some peppermint supplements. The key function here is that a dietary supplement is taken by mouth because it is under the food classification. It supplements the diet. So it's a dietary ingredient, which could be the essential oil, that supplements the diet. It also includes vitamins, minerals, herbs, amino acids, enzymes. All of these other things fall under the same classification. But in terms of aromatherapy, this is only applicable to oils that we're going to ingest. In the case of Selexin, for example, it comes in a capsule that is meant to be ingested. So this is not talking about a bottle of essential oils. If you also happen to say, I recommend that you ingest it, then ta-da, it's a dietary supplement. This is talking about products that are intended to supplement the diet. They're intended to be taken by mouth. This doesn't mean we can drop a drop or two of essential oils in water and call it a supplement. These are specifically formulated products that are safe to be ingested. So they're coming in tablets, capsules, soft gels. They can come in liquids, but again, it's not just the regular bottle of essential oil. And they can also take other forms, such as a bar. We can have a dietary supplement that's a food bar, that's a snack bar, or a diet bar, or something like that. And if they do, then information has to be present on the label to clarify exactly what it is that it does. Now, for dietary supplements, again, we're talking about products that are under the general umbrella of foods and not drugs. Now, the difference here, though, is that a dietary supplement can't make drug claims because it's not a drug, but it can have a label, and it actually is required to have a label that describes how the ingredient affects the structure or function of the human body. It can also describe the documented mechanism by which this ingredient acts to maintain the structure or function. So it's not making a disease claim. It's not claiming to prevent or treat or cure a disease, but it is making a structure and function claim. A structure function claim describes the role of the product and how it would affect the normal structure and function of the body. So it maintains joint health. It alleviates feelings of stress. It maintains heart health. So again, we're still not referring to a disease state or a state of health. We're not saying it reduces pain from arthritis. We're not saying it prevents arthritis. We're not even saying it relieves painful joints. Another thing to keep in mind here is, again, it's not determined by the word choice, but the total message that is collectively communicated in the package materials. So if you are specifically indicating it's going to relieve painful joints, that's different than maintains joint health. And it might seem like a fine line, and at first glance it is, but once you start really looking at the distinctions between the two, then it becomes very clear. We're maintaining normal structure and function of the body versus we're treating a disease. Now, it's important to recognize that only supplements can make these structure and function claims. So essential oils can only make structure and function claims when they are in some sort of preparation for ingestion, which is why we have so few of them, because you have to be very careful when you're formulating ingestion products for the general public. You've got to really know what you're doing and to really have some precision in your dosing and perhaps even standardization. A lot of essential oil companies, though, are making structure and function claims because these guidelines are so complex they can be confusing. That's the most common issue we find when we actually conduct those scientific evaluations of a company's product line. When we identify, what are the claims that you could be making that you're missing out on, and also what are the areas that you could be getting in trouble. This is the most common area that we find, is cutesy little names referring to disease states, thinking that as long as I don't call it acne, then I'm okay, or as long as I don't call it nausea, then I'm okay, or trying to make these structure and function claims for an essential oil product that is not meant to be ingested. So this is a very dangerous practice that we have to be very careful that we don't actually engage in. So an essential oil that's for the purpose of inhalation or for topical application is either a drug or a cosmetic. Those are the two choices available. Same is true for an herbal product. If it's a balm or a salve or a cream or a lotion, then it's going to be a drug or a cosmetic. It cannot make structure and function claims. Now, another important thing to keep in mind is that you can have an essential oil for ingestion that can make a structure and function claim that is okay with the FDA and still is in violation of the FTC, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before we do, I want to go over that final classification, which is cosmetics. The vast majority of aromatherapeutic products that we formulate are going to fall under the classification of cosmetics. These are articles that we rub, pour, sprinkle, spray, or somehow otherwise introduce to the human body for cleansing, beautification, promoting attractiveness, altering the appearance. So we've got everything from makeup to perfumes to moisturizers, hair coloring, deodorant, everything else, with the exception of soap, which the FDA addresses separately. If the product is intended for therapeutic use, such as treating or preventing disease or to affect the structure or function of the body, it's not a cosmetic, it's a drug. So it doesn't matter if it's a lotion. If the intended use is for a therapeutic purpose, it's a drug. Intended use here is the key. So if you're wondering, how do I tell? How do I know if what I'm making is a cosmetic or if I'm in trouble and it's a drug? Then ask yourself, why is someone going to buy this product based upon what I've said on the packaging and on my website? And this is, again, where it can be helpful to have a third-party team come in and look at this and evaluate. This is the total takeaway message that you're conveying. What am I communicating in the packaging of this product? What am I communicating on the website? Am I communicating that this lotion is a drug? And if you are, then you're open to an FDA letter, to getting a letter that you're selling an unauthorized drug. This is important clarification directly from the FDA. Intended use can be established several ways. We can look at claims on the labeling. We can look at claims in advertising, claims on the internet, claims in a brochure, claims in a package insert, claims in an ad. If the product is marketing as a cosmetic, but it has those claims, again, even if they're implied, it's considered a drug. And it always goes back to that intended use. Intended use is to treat or prevent disease or otherwise affect the structure or function. So if we're saying that this product is going to restore hair growth, reduce cellulite, regenerate skin cells, any of these other factors, if we're saying it's going to address acne, promote clear skin, then we're making drug claims. And interestingly enough, the FDA specifically addresses the use of essential oils here. And this is a direct quote from the FDA. The principle also holds true for essential oils. I don't know why they have essential oils in quotes there, but this is a direct quote from their website. A fragrance marketed for promoting attractiveness is a cosmetic, but if it's marketed with certain, and again with the excessive quotes, aromatherapy claims, such as the claim that it's going to help you sleep or quit smoking, it's a drug. If it's a massage oil that's to lubricate the skin and have a fragrance, then it's a cosmetic. If it's to relieve muscle pain, it's a drug. So, quick summary, for inhalation, it can be a cosmetic if it's for perfumery. If it is for a disease claim or a structure function claim, it's going to be a drug. For topical application, it can be a cosmetic if it's for fragrance or beautification or other purposes. If we're making a disease claim or if we're making a structure function claim, it's a drug. For ingestion, we don't ingest cosmetics, so that one's not available there. But here we can make structure and function claims within the FTC guidelines, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We could also make drug claims, again, going through the same process that we would have to. Now, before you turn your computer off and say, I quit, this is an impossible path, this sounds ridiculous, what can we actually do? I want to emphasize that while it's overwhelming and frustration at first, it's actually a very clear path forward. And once you kind of shake away some of the other stuff that you've been told about semantics and about how you need to say it this way, or say, well, what I would do is, or, you know, call diseases different names or whatever it might be, and just clear all of that garbage out and look very clearly at what is the intended use of my product? What do I want people to do with it? How do I then need to market it? It might require going back to the drawing board sometimes with a few things, but you're going to give yourself room to grow, and you're going to be sure that you can sleep better at night. You never have to worry, what if I get an FDA warning letter? What if something happens? There's a very clear pathway forward, and I say this with experience. We do this all the time for established brands who find out, oh no, I didn't even realize, I was told if we did this, our attorney said we could do it this way, whatever it might be. We help find this path forward all the time, and there are several ways to move forward from here. So I want to kind of transition into the good news side of things, how we actually are able to make these claims, what you might already be able to do with your products, and what options are available with your products. So to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about what it actually looks like to get a drug approved. This is something a lot of aromatherapists never investigate, a lot of essential oil companies never investigate, because we have this concept in our head that it's billions of dollars to get a drug approved. And that's true if you're in a lab and you want to create a new chemotherapeutic agent, you know, from scratch with some sort of synthetic ingredients. Not necessarily true though for herbs and essential oils. We actually have a different pathway, we have a different process. So there's two ways to make legitimate FDA approved drug claims about your products. The first one is, and I'm actually going to go kind of backwards with what's on your screen. I'm going to start on the right here. The first is over-the-counter monographs. There are a lot of ingredients that are pre-approved by the FDA to make drug claims. Menthol is one of them. Psyllium husks, eucalyptus. Some of them are chemicals in essential oils. Some of them are whole oils. There are a lot of herbs on here. They have pre-approval from the FDA. As long as you are following what the monograph says, then it's very easy to formulate an FDA-approved drug using your herbs and essential oils. But what do you do if there's not a pre-approval here? Then you actually have to get that approval. It's a little bit more complex, but it's still not that difficult. So here we go over to, you have to file an IND, which is an investigational new drug application. And then you conduct clinical studies, and then you can submit all of that and file a new drug application, and you can get approval there. Now, if you go the new drug application route, then it can be over the counter or it can be a prescription. And there actually are botanical prescription drugs that have gone that route and obtained prescription drug status. The difference has to do with whether or not it's safe for people to dispense the product themselves, which for most essential oils and most applications, it is safe for over the counter. So if there is an existing monograph, that's a great approach to follow. If there's not, that doesn't mean you're prohibited from making those drug claims. It's just going to be a little bit more work. So we'll talk about that complex method first. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get the investigational new drug application. This is before you can conduct clinical trials with your product. And it's actually pretty simple and fast, but to kind of go over just briefly what you have to include in here, you have to have a complete application packet for the FDA that looks at what type of research you want to conduct, who's qualified to conduct that research, conflicts of interest, risks of your product, and every product has risks. It's your job to find them, or if your research firm's job to find them. Chemistry and manufacturing, how you're producing that product, the raw materials, how you are integrating quality control with your raw botanical materials. An environmental analysis is what you're doing safe for the environment. Is it safe for you to be doing this? What are the active components that we do know about in your botanicals? Pharmacology and toxicology, we have to look at the pharmacodynamics. What's happening in the body? How is this actually working? Toxicology, carcinogenity, is there a level at which this product is going to cause cancer in the body? Reproductive toxicology, all of those safety elements. Previous human experience, which we have a lot of in the field of aromatherapy. And depending upon what you want to do with your product, then there's additional information. Dependence and abuse potential. Can someone become addicted to your product? Pediatric studies and pregnancy studies are now required. How are you going to plan for identifying risks and benefits in pediatric and pregnant populations? And depending upon what your product is, there might be other information that's required there as well. So you send all of that information in, and you can start clinical trials. And the phases here that we go through for this process include preclinical, which is where you're in a lab developing a drug. Phase 1, where you're figuring out safety. Those are expensive. And this is why you hear that it costs billions and billions of dollars to develop a new drug, because you often go back to the drawing board time and time again in this stage. Well, here's some exciting news. We don't use that stage for essential oil drugs or for herbal drugs. We don't have to, because we already know our substances are safe in the human body. We have extensive human use. We actually get to skip right ahead to phase 2 and sometimes even to phase 3 studies with essential oils. So here we're going into whether or not it actually works and looking for those more rare side effects that we would need to disclose on the label. And then your drug is approved. Then you have an FDA approved custom formulation or custom blend. It's actually a fraction of the cost of developing a new pharmaceutical and relatively easy to maintain. The FDA actually has an entire division that works with botanical drugs for this specific process. So while it might cost pharmaceutical companies hundreds of millions or even billions, again, it's a fraction of the cost for natural products. The main reason we don't have more of this is because companies are not investing the money into having it done. And then because a lot of products don't work. They get started with one clinical trial or another clinical trial and find that it doesn't work. And there's actually a big market there for conducting clinical trials for products that don't work. In fact, we actually, with the foundation, have even had to establish a guideline at the beginning when we first work with clients that we won't even accept a clinical trial if there's not a reason to believe the product is going to work. If it's unlikely to work, it's unethical for us to conduct that clinical trial, not just for the company, but for the participants, for the human participants that participate in our studies. It's not ethical for us to be using something we don't think is actually going to work here. So achieving that efficacy, and then of course having companies actually invest in it, is actually the barrier here. It's not that it can't be done. It's not that it's billions of dollars or even millions of dollars, depending on the particular situation and the population. It's just that people don't know it can be done and they're not doing it. So the other approach, back to the monographs, it may not be necessary to go through that entire process. If you have approved active ingredients, such as menthol, then they've already been recognized as safe and effective for the purpose specified in the monograph. And now it doesn't mean you can just use anything with menthol and make claims. But for example, menthol can be marketed as an over-the-counter antitussive drug, provided your product meets the criteria outlined in the monograph. So there are a lot of substances that a lot of essential oil companies are carrying, big ones and small ones, that actually could be making drug claims. If you have a product line, you might want to go and look carefully at your products that you have available, because you might have stuff that could be making a drug claim. You could be marketing an over-the-counter drug with your essential oils and be able to make very clear and direct claims. There are additional requirements for how you package and label those products, and you do have to follow some guidelines there, but that is a very easy and affordable way to dramatically increase what you're able to do with your product line and what you're able to do with your products. Now, if you're not interested in going through the entire process to get an FDA approved drug, and you have a product that doesn't necessarily fit in the monograph, there are still the potential for structure and function claims. A lot of companies are taking that route, especially in the herbal medicine realm. Rather than investing in getting drug approval, and because there's not a monograph, we're just going to make structure function claims. Now, again, you can't do this for topical applications or inhalation. You can only do this for ingestion. And doing it for ingestion is not a given, because you could violate the FTC, as we talked about earlier. So for some clarity here, the FDA has to do with your labeling. How are you labeling it? And primarily, what are you disclosing to people? The FDA wants to make sure you're not claiming that it can act like a drug if you haven't provided them evidence and had them review it, and that you are disclosing everything you need to disclose to them. The FTC has more to do with how are you advertising and marketing this? What claims are you putting on your websites? So they're not interested as much in drug claims as much as they are in looking at honesty. Can you substantiate what you're saying your product does? So you can meet the FDA requirements and still violate FTC guidelines. Structure and function claims are not just a free-for-all where if you have an essential oil supplement, you can just make all of these claims and it's fine. You still have to have substantiation through rigorous scientific evidence, and you might even have to conduct original research studies in order to substantiate your structure and function claims. So this is something where it might sound like it's subjective, but it really is not subjective. There are clear guidelines here for how you can substantiate these claims. Now, one alternative is a lot of people like to make those implied claims, and hopefully you know how I'm going to respond to that by now. That doesn't work. Implied claims are still claims. In fact, the FTC actually calls it the net impression. So this is, again, not semantics. None of this is about semantics. All of this is about what is the total message being communicated. And so the net impression is the way they refer to it, and it is looking at the entire thing. And they actually specifically state if there's more than one way you can interpret your ad, all of the possible interpretations must be substantiated, all of it, the entire thing. And I know we are running low on time, and I don't want to cut any of this out, but I am going to kind of go a little bit quickly. You can read through this in your handouts. Here's an example of what that might look like and how using these additional words or alternate words and providing implied claims still won't work. Communication has to do with the entire message that's being communicated, the entire package. So there are a lot of ways to end up with dishonest claims. It doesn't necessarily involve directly lying. It's not, saying lavender cures cancer. Hints, implications, and suggestions. Failure to disclose details. If you fail to mention that, well, this will help with headaches unless you use too much, or unless this, or unless that, that's a dishonest claim. Endorsements from individuals who don't have credentials. This is a big one. If you have someone saying your essential oils are pure, they need to be a chemist. That endorsement, even if you're not talking about health claims, that endorsement needs to come from an expert who has credentials in the topic they're talking about. The misuse of disclaimers, overstating traditional use, and again, I'm not going to just read the slide to you. You can look through that in your handout. But a couple of things to point out: if a product is related to consumer health and safety, and if it's a claim that's difficult for a consumer to self-assess, then it is held to a higher standard. Essential oils are both of those things. So what does it mean to substantiate one of these claims? To substantiate a claim, then what they're looking for is the amount and type of evidence. The evidence has to be appropriate to the claim. The total quality of evidence, not how much you like it, but how much it actually meets research standards. The totality of the evidence, what does the entirety of the scientific evidence say? Are there clear conclusions here, or are we cherry picking our favorite studies? The relevance of the evidence, this is important. Just because you find a scientific study that says this oil does that, unless it is the exact same way you're talking about using it, then it's not relevant. And this is one where a lot of people fall into that trap. Again, the qualifications of endorsements: if someone is endorsing something, they need to be qualified to endorse that specific thing. And the way that we refer to traditional use. So you can say this oil was traditionally used for this purpose, but if you're using it, and again, the message you're trying to convey is that it has modern science to substantiate it, when it doesn't, then you can't use that to substantiate the claim. So this is something, again, where you can try to DIY it. It's really not a DIY task, though, but it is a very cheap, affordable task that a clinical researcher could put together for you, or a research firm could put together for you. And they would also be able to advise you if there's not enough evidence, if you actually need to conduct some original research there. It's well worth checking out and looking into, because it's highly affordable, especially given the potential new marketing opportunities that would be available for your products, especially if you also have herbal products where you do have a little bit more ingestion that is taking place. And then a little bit about this disclaimer. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA, blah, blah, blah. This is the DSHEA disclaimer. This is necessary to include on your product, but it's not going to cure a deceptive ad. So slapping this on your label and then still violating those guidelines is still violating those guidelines. So you need to have this. This is how we kind of disclose and clarify. We are not making a drug claim here. We are making a structure function claim, or whatever it is that you're saying on your label. But it's not an excuse to then turn around and make a claim. So you can't pop this on there and then turn around and make a drug claim and say, but I put the disclaimer on there that I wasn't making a drug claim. That's a little bit, again, like changing your speedometer and saying, but I changed my speedometer. It says I'm going 40, but you're still not going 40. So it doesn't matter what it says. It matters how fast your car is actually going. So quick summary before we head into questions. Conveying the health effects of botanical products involves following guidelines from all of those regulatory associations. If you're not selling products, then you need to just make sure that you are not violating medical licensing laws in your state, and that you're not violating the natural health philosophies and your personal ethics. You don't have to worry about the FDA or the FTC. They do not check in on what you do. If you work for an essential oil company, or you sell products, or you have your own product line, then you also have to make sure you're not making any claims that are unauthorized or unsubstantiated. And the most important takeaway is it's not about semantics. So it's not what words can I say and what words can I not say. It's what is the total message I'm conveying. Is the total message I'm conveying drug claims or the practice of medicine? Or is the total message I'm conveying one of education and empowerment about how to use essential oils, and one that fits within the authorization I have obtained for my specific product? So what that means is you might, be exploring new avenues. What are some drug claims that I could be making for my products that I'm not currently making? You might be thinking, I've really got to rename a few products, or change the way that I have this on my website, or update some of my client consulting materials. Whatever that is, that total message is your benchmark. That's your measuring stick for, am I compliant or am I not compliant? How do I communicate all this information that I have without constantly looking over my shoulder and making sure that I'm doing it correctly? And then I always kind of conclude with this contact information. Our entire research team is always happy to help people with this. This is something we're really passionate about. Yes, we do work with big companies and do studies, but we work with aromatherapists and students and individuals on a daily basis with a lot of just free information. Email us a question or ask a quick question or whatever that might be. You don't have to be a big firm that hires us to actually get that information from us. So if you're going through this and you're revising your website and you come up with questions, there's a wide variety of places you can find me. Please don't feel like you can't ask a question, unless you're a big client or, whatever that might be. Facebook message me, email me, whatever it might be, and say, I was confused on this. We're happy to help and make sure you have that information. And I'm sorry, Kelly, I know I went over, but I'll go ahead and transition over to questions.
Well, thank you so much, Jessie. Talk about encompassing the phrase, which is one of our mottos here, is empowering through education, or education to empower somebody. Wow. I mean, incredible. And thank you so much. And it's like we talked about before we started the recording, you and I, that this whole topic in itself could be like a whole course in itself. So we look forward to learning more from you in the future. But I really want to thank you on the behalf of myself and NAHA and all the attendees and our members, because this is something that comes up often with questions, even to the NAHA office. So this is going to be a great empowerment tool to be able to share with them. So
Good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I love doing this. So
I know, and it's fine that you went over. Fun. You could have went longer if you wanted, because you always have so much great information to share. So thanks again. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.